Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to this webinar or instruction telco, as we also call it, from SCIS, the Smart Cities Information System. We do these kind of instruction telcos on a regular basis, which means that last year, when the current SCIS team did the first series of these instruction telcos, we had a series of 5 of them, because there were many projects that were not familiar with the system yet, and actually it was quite new. All the projects were at that time involved. We will now do this year a second series of probably 3. 2 are planned already, this one and one on, I believe, March 25. And the first one of those is specifically targeting the newer projects that have positive energy districts as a main topic for their project. So what you see on your screen at the moment, I hope that everything works for that. I'm sharing my screen. The project we invited are the 3 newest ones that had started end of last year, which is Atelier, Sparks, and Positive. But there were also 2 that started about a year earlier, City Exchange and Making City. We also invited those because we will be focusing now on PED, positive energy districts, and this the recent reporting form that we designed explicitly for those projects. So Making City and City Exchange might have been participating in the last sessions of last year, but there is now indeed a new set of forms, a new reporting system for specifically those projects, which will they have to use as well. So we have until about 10:30 the first part, which will be recorded. It's about 30 to 40 minutes, I guess, and the topics that we will cover is a brief introduction to the self-reporting tool. So everywhere where you see the abbreviation SRT, it means self-reporting tool. We then focus on the KPI. Recently there were many questions from the newer projects about KPI development. Many projects they'll decide on their KPI at the beginning of the project and on how to monitor them. So I will briefly go into the way of working of SCIS regarding the KPI. Then about the access to the tool. Some of you have it already, some others are working on it. And then I will go more in depth into how to create your forms. We call all the actions in the project fields of action. That's or a thematic field or whatever. But if you encounter the abbreviation FOA, it means field of action. I will go into the details of the PED forms, and I will tell something about the visualization of data, because it's not only about how to record the results of all the projects, but also what can we do with them. And we worked hard on this last year, and I can show you some of the current results. And then after that there will be questions, a session of questions. So some people have asked me what was our method for the methodology behind the KPIs that are in our system. And to be frank with that, has been a quite pragmatic approach. On the one side, there were already, when we started with SCIS, it is about 2.5 years ago, there were already many predecessors like the Concerto Plus Consortium, Concerto Premium, SCIS 1, and they all had developed KPI sets depending on the kind of projects the EU was calling proposals for. That is on the sheet that you see in the left side bullets. The middle one of that is very important to be to keep in mind. So the KPI for SCIS and in the SRT are project-based, pilot projects. So the fields of action, they result in a KPI. So whether they meet the targets or what is the key result in terms of energy or people using whatever has been developed, and it is not city-based. Whereas many KPI, for example, performance indicators from ISO. ISO is a major standardization company, and they have their ISO 37120, the fourth one on the right-hand side of the screen. Which is on sustainable development of communities and indicators for city services and quality of life. So that is very wide. We've talked to people involved in that. They say themselves it has resulted in a list of 400 indicators, and actually not many people are very happy with that, because if you would would like to standard or test compliance, whether cities comply with, are they compliant with this standard, then, well, no city will actually do that, because, or will try it, because those 400 indicators would mean a huge effort for, let's say, recording all kind of things, and the question there is, what is the return of that? So we have taken all these things that you see into account. Some of them were already taken into account by our predecessor teams. But you can understand that if you want to also visualize data and well, keep the recording and accounting effort by the project manageable and logic, we need to be concise. And also these forms are like one size fits all for many projects around Europe. So it could be that because of the specific targets of the individual projects, these projects have additional KPI than there are in the self-reporting tool. But the self-reporting tool is quite based on numbers. So it's not about level of satisfaction or all these kind of, let's say, softer or more descriptive results. It's more about numbers in energy and cost and so on. So it means that everybody should take into account that the SRT is the reporting tool that allows visualization of data. So where people use less energy or more energy, or there is more CO2 savings or less. But there is always the requirement from the EU to deliver your monitoring reports, probably. you all have deliverables, and in these deliverables will be monitoring reports, and especially the information you cannot enter into this system. That kind of information should go into your reports rather than the self-reporting tool. So I hope I've a little bit explained, and we will go later into the details of which KPI we have for the different areas. Another topic, actual for new projects, of course, is how to get access to the SRT. It's limited. You need to have an account in order to have access. That means a username and password, and your project needs to be known in the system. So usually at the beginning of the project, so that is currently that is the case for let's say Atelier, Sparks, and Positive. The project needs to be known, and the way to do that is to ask for a project intake form from info@smartcitiesinfosystem.eu. That is the general email address for the SCIS team. And the team responsible for that, which is Steinbeis, will send you this form, and completing it gives the SCIS team all the information to create your project entry in a predefined format. And I hope most of you have already been on the SCIS website, and under the projects tab, you can find the projects that have been registered with their basic info, their goals, etc. And once this has taken place, and we know what are the so-called demo sites. The demo sites is are the demonstrator cities where the actual pilot projects, or fields of action as we call them, are taking place. Those demo sites need to be known. They will be created by the SCIS team, and these are necessary because access to the SRT is connected to the demo sites. Usually, the SCIS team is in contact with the coordinator of the monitoring and evaluation work package or similar in the projects, and they decide with their team which people need to have access. And a common approach is that there is a dedicated person for a specific demo site to enter the data, because if it is a specialized system, it takes a little bit of learning, so it is better to limit the number of people that are involved with it, so that less people have to do the learning for only a limited amount of work. So the info we require then from these people that want to have access is the name of the person, the project name, which demo site they need access. You can select multiple ones. So the work package leader might want to have access to all the demo sites to check on the work of the individual people entering the data, and your email address and phone number. Email address is necessary for the account, and of course, if you have any questions about things we encounter, things that might have gone wrong or something like that, we would like to be able to address you. When this email with the names of these persons has been sent to SCIS, then we will create accounts, and the system sends out instructions on activation, password creation, etc. So far for the SRT access. So which key performance indicators are there on this field of positive energy districts. The presentation that has been sent around has a lot of hidden slides because I use one bigger presentation that could serve many purposes. So if you want, you can also look at the indicators that are there for new buildings, refurbished buildings, energy systems, mobility, and ICT. So that those were the previously existing categories or thematic fields of fields of action. But for the PET projects, what you see now is the indicators we decided to have in the system, more or less in line with the indicators. For example, for new buildings and refurbished buildings, because well, on the technical side they are similar. So they are the total net energy need for the in this case for the district. So it is a summation of buildings data. So on the level of the PET itself, the individual data of the buildings are not regarded as a KPI, but the summation over the entire district is. That limits the amount of KPI and is more tailored to the goal of the project. Then we have a bit more limited KPI, which says the total net energy without appliances. That is because we know about the discussions going on what is actually a positive energy district. There are many things that people consider whether it needs to be taken into account or not, because you could focus on a positive energy district as a set of buildings and local renewable energy, and then you take only the energy that is needed to operate the buildings and leaving out all the consumer energy, because that is not something that developers have influence on, or at least not so much. When it comes to the lighting, the energy system, etc., the developers can well set the standards, not so much on the amount of audio equipment, computers, television, whatever people have. So in order to to see whether developers comply with what they set out to do, we also have this stripped off net energy need included as a KPI. Then for the positive energy district, there is the net incoming energy. So that is the energy balance. And if this would be the net incoming energy would be positive, so there is more coming in than going out, then it is not a positive energy district. If it is negative, then it is then it qualify or would comply with the fact that it is positive energy. Another indicator is a technical indicator is how much of that energy of the energy need is covered by resources coming from outside the district boundaries. That is to say from how much self-consumption is there in the district. On the environmental side, which is just a category that was already existing, this technical, this environmental, economic, and social KPI, we have greenhouse gas emissions in tons per annum, the local renewable energy generation, and the percentage of the total net energy covered by these local renewable energy sources. And by the way, in order to not to deviate too much in these indicators from what the EU asked for in their calls for proposals, all these projects have in the proposal stage had the obligation to fill out their best form. The best form already exists a long time, also from older projects. It was the building estimate specification table, which set out to be a standard way of indicating what would be the performance of the buildings. That is because the EU wants to compare across projects, across countries, and many countries have different building codes, etc. So they had their best tables. For the PET projects, the best tables were simplified and aggregated over the buildings. So you can indicate the performance of each building, and then it ends up with a total, and you can indicate the local energy sources. In the end, it ends up with the indicators that are shown here. So it should not be, at least from the design side, it should not be too much of extra work to come up with these indicators, maybe apart from the indicators that you are also developing for your, additionally, for your own project. Second page is here is the economic KPI and the social ones. And for those people that are already a little bit familiar with the SRT, these economic and social KPI are kind of similar for all the different thematic fields, whether it is refurbished or new buildings or ICT project, mobility projects. It is about investment, the grant, which gives you the net investment, of course, and then you have something that gives you a return. It could be the net energy savings, but it could also be the value of your improvements. I mean, if you have LED lighting in your city, it might give you energy savings. Probably it will do, but a lot of people also say, well, the color of the light in the case of LED is much better, which makes the streets a safer environment. So you could also argue that there is savings or improvements in quality of life, and of course that's difficult to well, monetize. But in this case, we can only express improvements in terms of money, in terms of being able to calculate payback, etc. So that's why we added the value of the improvements also in this category. And of course, from the savings, you need to subtract operating costs that you might have additionally, and it can calculate your dynamic payback period or return on investment. And for social, it is mainly about how many people are involved and whether there are any jobs created. The manual that I will come to later on is more specific about what to include here. But I can tell you that it is not about the number of jobs in the project, but the meaning is number of jobs because of the project, so permanent jobs afterwards. Of course, it's in the beginning of the project that's difficult to estimate, but it is something that the EU always wants to know. So that's why it has been included. I hope so far it is a bit clear about how we came to the KPI, what KPI are relevant in the SRT for the positive energy district projects. And then we go more into the how to create your data form and and how to fill it in. So when you have access to a certain demo site with your credentials, when you log in to the SRT, you will see a screen like what is on your computer screen now. At least the image on the left hand side. It will not be pink. The pink color is because of the test environment that we internally have, and where we can play around with the things that we are developing. And I've used those screens to create this presentation. But what you will see is similar without the pink color. So this is we used an old demo site here, which was E2 rebuild, which doesn't matter at all, but to create a form for a PED. So we had two examples. So one was called FED test, and the other one is called instruction sample. But whatever you create on this form, and when you save it, it will be listed in the list on the left hand side. So on this definition form, because most projects will probably have only one positive energy district. So in your demo site, there will be likely only be one of these in the list on the left hand side. Older projects that have different buildings, etc., they have entries for each building, and they have maybe mobility separate and ICT separate. But I guess that for the current generation of projects, there will be only one, which is then defined in this form on a general level. So the data entered here are heating degree days for the design and the year on which it is based. Later on, you can add heating degree days for monitoring. You enter the year of the monitoring, that is later in the project. Similar for cooling degree days and if applicable, and the global solar radiation. This is kind of information that is, let's say, geographic site specific, and that's why it's on the demo site page. There is also a small part on financial parameters, and that is because when monetizing energy savings, etc., you need to know what is the value of the energy, and values entered on this page will be the default for the different forms, and used for the calculations. In older projects, there were many. There could be many different specific fuels with different values, and then in the actual form, you can enter a more specific value. But if you don't do that, then there is the calculation used with this, and the default values are EU averages for electricity for consumers, and also the gas price for consumers. If you have, it get more complicated if you have, for example, a district with different users that have different prices they pay for gas and electricity. In that case, it would be wise to override these prices wherever it is required to be more specific in order to get to better values. Yeah. So at the bottom of this first screen, you get into the fields of actions, and the fields of actions is actually well, in this case, for example, the PET test 866. If you press the arrow that is on the right side of the bar, then you can expand and enter data for this this item in the list. You give it a name. In this case, it was. Oh no, I'm sorry. I made a mistake. So what you see is that we had two in the list. The pet test 866, which is now collapsed. And if you press this arrow, it will expand. But for the instruction sample item in the list that was in the previous slide, we have pressed that button, and then it expands, so then that you can give it the name and what kind of thematic field the field of action applies to. And in this case, we entered the positive energy district. And there is help on the screen that indicates which categories you can choose from, but you can also see it if you press the button, you get the total list. And I'm sorry, but on in the green buttons here on at the bottom, the pet energy district item was not included in this list yet, but now it is. So that is what you can see, and it is important that you carefully choose the name of the instruction sample, because it is you cannot change it. The system is storing new fields of actions with new names as separate items, and that would spoil the statistics of our of all the samples that all the FOAs that we have. If it is needed to rename it for some reason, then store the data somewhere on your computer. You can do that, for example, by pressing Control P on the screens that will be created, and then the data are stored as a PDF if you want, or you print it, and then you need to redo some of the work by entering the data in a differently named form. It's so think about the name carefully when you begin. Yeah, so if you're on the thematic field, if you have pressed that button that was here, then you get this list that you can select from the different items. They are listed in alphabetical order, so positive energy district is here. If you select that, then you get to the screen that I have shown previously. And here, and again, I've indicated cannot change the name. So it is also blocked. So if you encounter that, then I hope you remind this webinar and know, oh yes, I couldn't change that. Of course, you can select other ones because other projects do that too, to indicate information on buildings. But what we want to avoid is that there is double reporting on the project. So if you would have a positive energy district only of new buildings and an energy system, you could also fill out this and this, but for the sake of clarity, it would be better to stick to the positive energy district if you are in one of the projects that had this as a specific topic. Then, if you've done that, you will see a form like, a form will be created and it will add to the list. So instruction sample has appeared here, and there is a design form created to be filled out. If you click that, if you click on that one, then you will open your form ready for data entry. And the beginning of the action is filling in the general data for your district, which is the names of the different buildings that are involved, the year of commissioning, what use type, that is industrial, tertiary, or residential, the gross floor area, which is one of the KPI, by the way, too. There is also a button here, actions, which means that you can remove here a building. If you want to add one, you press the button on the top left side, add the new item. And we do that at the beginning, and we have made the forms so that the next sections of the form synchronize with the buildings that have been indicated. So you, when there is questions about the space heating, hot water, lighting, as indicated here, this building one is the name is synchronized with what has been entered here, and so forth, so that there is no ambiguity about well, differently named buildings, or maybe about spelling errors, etc. What you need to add is enter is the are the cells with the 4 arrows, because the other ones are calculated based on previously entered data. So you enter the kilowatt hours per square meter per annum from the design, and then of course, and we have here the amount of square meters, which will calculate the total, so that limits work and also avoids errors. The calculations take place. To be sure, you need to save the form in order to see all the calculations that are in the form. The subtotal here on the right hand side is done automatically, but for example, the values that are the summation of the different buildings, for that you need to save the form. I need to speed up a little, because otherwise we have later no times for questions. Then the local res, it is not necessarily connected to the buildings in the districts. So it could be on a building, but it could also be the marketplace or something, if they have a wind turbine there, or a solar facility, whatever. That can, so I indicated here location for PV, location for wind, or something like that. And then again, you have to fill out the data, how much you have of that. In this case, if you want to add a building or location, you add the plus arrow. If you want to remove one, the minus. And if you want to change the order of the way they appear here, you press the plus or minus button. And the system, again, when you save, it calculates the totals here, and the percentage of total net energy need covered by local res. And if you would go back to the Excel sheets by the Commission, that is the best sheets for the PET, you will see that this kind of mimics that. Of course, this is no Excel, so it looks different, but most of the data you will find in your best sheet and can copy them in your in this form. There's also questions about energy in and out. So if you have calculated your energy balance, you can calculate how much in and out for electricity, in and out for gas. It will probably be in, but sometimes there is biogas production, so you could have also gas out. But I guess normally here the energy flow would be in for most of the items, and only electricity could go out. That is also added together to come up with the total value. and a percentage of the total energy need of those of the net incoming energy. We also have greenhouse gas emission that is calculated in tons per annum. For that, there is a remark. I have a remark because the earlier forms they had where there is a lot more variety in fuels and so on. To come from energy to greenhouse gas emissions, you need to multiply with the emission factor. In the manual for all these for this SRT, there are a few tables that come up with the average emission factors for a variety of fuels, and we have not implemented that calculation method here, but it is something you need to do yourself. If you have multiple fuels and an amount of energy associated with that, then each fuel needs to be multiplied with its own specific emission factor and then add up the total to enter the value here. And we did that because it's the same way as the EU has implemented their own Excel forms. Then in the best tables, there is questions about energy management measures, whether they are available or not. We transformed that in a kind of tick box system where you can indicate whether something is there or not, and the default is no everywhere. So it is a limited amount of work to enter this part, and yet it is this is on the district level and also on specific buildings level. Similar for storage. Normally we have thermal batteries, or you can define your own storage. But well, I would ask everybody to stick to the terminology because that will be entered in the database, and then it would be easier to aggregate values and so on. It can be separated over the different buildings. And other measures is also something that is indicated in the EU. And also you come up with your own name for the measure. We didn't know what to predefine here, so it is a free format. But those, if it is existing in your district, then you enter the individual elements here, and for each building you indicate whether it is yes or no. And that ends up, so this is the best, well, so far it was based on the best form, but then we had to decide about the technical KPI, which we want to be similar to the KPI in all the other forms. And what you see here, this part will be used for the KPI comparisons, visualizations, etc. And what you find here is what I presented earlier. The values are, for most part, are calculated automatically from the data that have been entered. But if you do not agree for some reasons, because you don't agree with the methodology of calculations, etc., you can provide your own value, which will then override the value that is calculated by the system. But I encourage everybody to carefully, well, think twice before you do that, because there is value in the comparison justification if the methodology for calculating the KPI is similar for the different projects. So you need to have a strong reason to provide your overridden value. And the same holds for environmental. On the economic part, what you have seen so far, the best forms are not about economics. So that is new. That is something that needs to be added based on your own project and work. But when you enter the financial data in the cells in the beginning, then the system will calculate the dynamic payback period automatically based on the system that is in the self-reporting tool manual. Yeah, there are some important notes to take into account. This sheet is more general, not only for pets. So the first comments are on the buildings forms, which I will skip here, and how the final energy use is calculated is also not relevant specifically for the pet forms. There is it's good to know already that we have design forms and we have monitoring forms. So the design forms are based on the best tables and the beginning of the project. Monitoring data are usually only available near the end of the project, say year 4 or year 5. And the EU already wants to know a lot about this project, what is their ambition and what they want to achieve. So the design forms are kindly asked to be filled out in the first year of the project, when the designs will probably be completed if they are deviating from the proposal. But you can enter those data already in the beginning of the project, and you can always update it until you create a monitoring form. Then it will be frozen for the reason that the monitoring form is a copy of the design form to limit the work needed. Before you open the monitoring, you need to be sure about whether the design form reflects your actual situation right. And then it will save a lot of work in the monitoring stage. And you can enter monitoring forms for each year. Normally they are, let's say, calendar years. Sometimes that's inconvenient in the flow of the project, and then it is June from one year to the middle of the next year. Then we are pragmatic and you choose either the first or the second year, but you need to account for the heating degree days, etc. There is a link here to the monitoring guides. We are currently in the process of updating the SRT guide for the reason that we have now the visualization and the this chapter on PEDs, but it will be on the website soon, which means within a couple of weeks. I will be short on this, but this sheet shows kind of the timeline for the use of the system. Some people know already what the EU is asking for because they've been in previous projects. So if you write a proposal, you could also already anticipate on what the EU wants to know from your project. So these technical monitoring guide, the KPI guide, SRT guides are all publicly available on the SCIS site. And you are able to, for example, tailor the monitoring part of your proposal to make it in line with the EU requirements. In the first year of the project, it is about making the data available in the SCIS system, assign the responsible persons. Again, here is the information that we need for people to provide, and then create the fields of action in the demo site. I have explained that, how to do it. And then until the end of the completion of the demonstrator, you can update and save data in the design form, and at completion of the demonstrator, finalize the form, create a monitoring form, and there is indicated here what is the well, the way for doing it, and also how to save locally your form as a PDF by pressing Ctrl P and saving your results so that it is available also offline if you want it. And you can then do monitoring data at the end of each year. I'm near the end, and I've already completed a year. I've been more elaborate than I thought before. Design data and monitoring data will be visualized, and we are currently in the process of transforming the currently available graphics by graphics based on the SRT, because there is now the different sources for data and often not clear where they come from, which is not a desirable situation. Yeah, I will. That's it about that. And on the SCIS website, it's possible to under experiences to go to the SCIS KPIs, where you select different KPI, the thematic field, the type of KPI you want to see, which one of those. So under environmental, you have, for example, CO2 emissions, and then you can say, oh, I want to see before, after, the reference, etc., and add the chart. And then the system generates graphics. Oh, sorry, I wanted to use it as a website, which is not possible. This is only a screenshot. But on the graphics will appear, and it shows from all the projects that have these kind of KPI. It will show the values. If you hover over the bars, it indicates where it comes from. If you click it, you will be directed directly to this project. So the visualization tool is also a tool to navigate the SCIS system if you are interested in technical data. For example, you're interested in refurbished buildings and in the project that have the most, in this case, that have most CO2 emission after the intervention. And then, oh, you quickly go here and you see, oh, it is the total CO2 emissions. It was a very large project with many buildings. So it might not be what you were looking for or wanted to look for. You can also go to the savings compared to the reference. And then this project might have a lot of savings too, which makes it interesting again. But this is the way you can go through these systems. The graphics have been updated recently, so now you have more colorful information about, for example, here a graphic about the total final energy demand in the case of monitoring of new buildings. Because the PET forms are so new, I cannot show yet how this visualization will look like for the PET forms, but what we will be sure of is that final energy consumption, CO2 emissions, a few of those will be certainly available in this visualization tool. Further, currently there is standard graphics on a very limited set of KPI on the SCIS website, for which you don't need to do your own choices. That is CO2 savings, demonstration area, final energy consumption, weighted average for different demo sites per project. And then you see the design data versus the monitoring data. So here it is very small print with design here on the left, monitoring on the right, to give more visual information about the impact of the projects. But this has not so much to do with the actual operation of the self-reporting tool, but just for your information. So that's it for now. We will stop the recording, and then we are open for questions if you still have some time. maybe 10 minutes or so.